person who's ever, if you read the Bible, every person in the Bible moved from one continuous storm to another one. They never got out of storms. They never got out of storms. In 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 4 and 5, it says, but in all things approving ourselves as ministers of God, in much patience, in much afflictions, in necessities, in distresses, in stripes, in imprisonment, in turmoils, in labors, in watching, and in fasting. Number 2, Jesus never came out of storms. In his mind, in the natural, he thought that when he got to the crucifixion, the storm would be over. But when he got to the crucifixion, it was still people there bad-mouthing him. So you figured after the crucifixion, the storm ought to be over. But then after the crucifixion, even at the resurrection, people were saying he didn't resurrect. People were saying it wasn't really him. And then after the resurrection, even up to now, people are still saying he's not the Christ. So the storms are still going on, even though he met the ultimate test. Say, Jesus met the ultimate test. And the storms didn't stop. Look at your neighbor and say, why you think yours have to stop? My. You haven't been crucified and yet yours have to stop. Yours don't stop. Point number 3. There's always a storm on the hinge of the door of promotion. There's always a storm on the hinge of the door. Anybody, if you have a visual mind now, you see the door, but the door turns on what? The hinge. So on the thing that the door turns on, that's where the storm is. There's always a storm on the hinge of the door. The storm is not all over the door, or else you wouldn't want to go through it. But soon as you get up to the door and get ready to go through it, here's the storm on the hinge, and it comes out and it grabs you and it causes you to be unaware, but God's not taken by surprise. You're always taken by surprise because you didn't see that thing coming. Anybody ever been in that situation? I knew I was supposed to walk through this. I know I was supposed to go through this. And the next thing we know, boom, your baby is not bothering me because our nursery is not open. And so we can preach over top of you. We can preach over her. Your baby is not bothering me. Okay, I'm just letting you know. I'm just letting you know. And I appreciate the fact that she was getting up. But when our nursery is not open, we don't want anyone to think that, the baby is bothering us. You say that's a lot going on. That's why y'all going to hurry up and get my building finished. Bless the Lord. Why you going to hurry up and get this building finished so there won't be so much going on. Amen. But whatever door you getting ready to walk through, just get it straight. On the hinge of that door is a storm. How many hinges on most doors? How many of you got them real tall doors? I got some 8-foot doors in my house. How many? Four hinges on them, aren't they? They're strategically placed. So the bigger the door you going through, the more hinges there are. And the more hinges there are, the more the more storms you're going to have to go through to get through that door. But guess what? In all these things, I'm what? More than a conqueror. In all these things, I'm what? See, the storm is sent there to send you back because you don't have a real revelation that God is riding on the storm. You don't have a real revelation that God said you can go through this. The house we live in, I was riding down the street to look at another house. And I rode past this house. There were only 3 houses on that side of the street. When I rode past the house, I heard the word foreclosure. Well, there were no sale signs. The sale sign was way down at the other end of the cul-de-sac for the house I was going to look at. There were no for sale signs. There were nothing anywhere on the house. And so I stopped and I made a U-turn and I came back and I drove 10 miles an hour. And there was only 3 houses. And I said, okay, God, I heard you say foreclosure. Where is it? When I got in front of that house, he said foreclosure again. I pulled into the driveway. He said foreclosure again. So the realtor went to go and inspect. The house was empty. It wasn't a for sale sign on it. It wasn't a lockbox on the front door. It was empty. It was vacant. We investigated. The house was in foreclosure. When we investigated, there were a lot of things that were wrong with the house. There were several situations. Make a long story short, the house ended up selling and I hope y'all gonna hear me, the house ended up selling for $400,000 less than it was worth. When the bank people came out, every one of them that came out stood there and said to me, how did you know this was going on? We're investors. We would have bought this. How did you know this was happening? I said, I was riding down the street and I heard the word foreclosure. Where you hear it from? Who told you? Nobody knew this. We are investors. We work with this bank. We would have picked up this property. When we went to the bank, do you know what the bank said? The bank said we tried to foreclose on this house 5 times and it kept falling through the cracks. How many times does a foreclosure fall through the cracks? Somebody be praying theirs would fall through the cracks so the house wouldn't be up on the market. They said, we don't know why the house is still sitting there. They went back 5 months. They said, we ordered it foreclosure 5 months ago. We've talked to every person that's touched it, and they said the paperwork would get lost. This would get lost. So it never got foreclosed on. And it was laying there in foreclosure. And because of some situations that had happened in it, the bank didn't want to deal with it. And they just took a loss and sold it at $400,000 cheaper than it was worth. Riding down the street, hearing the word from the Lord. Now, after you get in the house, guess what? You think because the Lord did that, the house is not going to have no problems. You think it's not going to be no problems with the house. Because if God could give you a deal like that, there wouldn't be any storms. But on the hinges of walking in them doors, there was some storms. And you have to remind yourself every day that, God, you were the one that told me. When it looked tight on paying the mortgage, you have to say, God, you were the one. God, I was riding down the street going down there. You. See, he want to know, what do you believe?